Sarah Chen stood at the massive crystal gates of the Nexaren royal palace, trying to keep her hands from shaking. The towering structure sparkled with 1,000 rainbow colors under the pink alien sun. As Earth's top diplomat, she had visited many alien worlds, but nothing quite matched the beauty of Nexara Prime. "This way, human ambassador," a tall, silver-skinned Nexaran guard said. His crystal armor clinked softly as he led her through the gates. Sarah adjusted her dark blue diplomatic uniform and followed him. This was supposed to be a routine meeting. Sign some trade agreements, discuss military cooperation against the Swarm Collective, and head back to Earth. Simple enough. At least, that's what she thought. The throne room took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers floated in the air without any visible support. The ceiling seemed to vanish into the sky, and the walls shifted colors like living rainbows. But it was the Nexaran queen who commanded all attention. Queen Valara sat on her crystal throne, her silver skin glowing with a soft inner light. Unlike the other Nexarans, who stood around 7 feet tall, the queen was nearly 9 feet in height. Her eyes, completely black except for pinpoints of starlight, focused on Sarah. "Welcome, Ambassador Chen," the queen's voice echoed in Sarah's mind, though her mouth didn't move. Like all Nexarans, she communicated through telepathy. "We have much to discuss." Sarah bowed deeply. "Thank you for receiving me, Your Majesty. Earth looks forward to strengthening our alliance." Indeed. The Queen's mental voice held an odd tone. "But first, I must share something extraordinary. I have had a vision." Sarah's diplomatic training kicked in. Nexaran visions were rare but taken very seriously. She stayed silent, waiting. "In this vision, I saw you, Ambassador Chen, bringing great change to our people. You see, my daughter, Princess Sarah, needs a partner, and you are the one." Sarah blinked. Surely she had misunderstood the telepathic message. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. Are you suggesting that you will live here and marry my daughter?" "Yes." The Queen's mental voice was firm. "It is what must be." Sarah's mind raced. This had to be a joke. But Nexarans didn't joke, at least not about visions. "Your Majesty, while I'm honored, I'm here as Earth's diplomat." "I can't possibly." "Of course you can," the Queen interrupted. "Unless Earth no longer desires our military support against the Swarm Collective." The threat was clear. Without Nexaran help, Earth's colonies would be defenseless against the mind-controlling swarm. Thousands would die. Millions would become slaves to the hive mind. Sarah felt trapped. She looked around the throne room, at the expressionless faces of the Nexaran court. None would meet her eyes. This was no random request. The Queen had planned this. "When?" Sarah's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and started again. "When would you like me to begin living here?" "Immediately." The Queen's mental voice held satisfaction. "Your things are already being moved to the East Wing. You will meet Princess Sarah at dinner." As guards led her away, Sarah felt numb. In less than 10 minutes her life had completely changed. She was now living proof that diplomatic suggestion was just a fancy term for royal command. The last thing she heard was the Queen's amused mental whisper, "Welcome to the family, Ambassador Chen. I'm sure you and my daughter will be very happy together." Sarah had a feeling that happy was going to be a very complicated word. Sarah sat in her new room, staring at the crystal walls that seemed to pulse with soft light. Her Earth uniforms looked out of place next to the flowing silver robes the servants had left for her. A knock on the door made her jump. "Dinner is ready, Ambassador." A guard's mental voice touched her mind. "The princess awaits." Walking through the palace halls, Sarah tried to remember her diplomatic training, but nothing had prepared her for an arranged marriage to an alien princess. The dining hall doors opened, and she froze. Princess Sarah wasn't anything like Sarah expected. Instead of the flowing robes her mother wore, the princess wore what looked like a mix between battle armor and formal wear. Her silver skin had a younger, brighter shine than the Queen's, and her star-filled eyes held a spark of rebellion. So you're the human mother is forcing me to marry. Zyra's mental voice was sharp and clear. She walked around Sarah, studying her. At least you're not boring looking. Sarah blinked. I thank you, Your Highness. Don't call me that. It's annoying. Zyra dropped into a chair, ignoring all proper dining etiquette. And why is your mind so quiet? I can barely hear you at all. Humans aren't telepathic, Sarah explained, carefully sitting down. We communicate through speaking. Zyra leaned forward, suddenly interested. You mean you keep all your thoughts to yourself? Always. That must be so peaceful. Before Sarah could answer, servants brought in the food. What followed was the most awkward dinner of Sarah's life. She struggled to use the crystal eating tools, while Zyra peppered her with direct questions that would have scandalized the royal court. Do you actually want to marry me? Zyra asked bluntly. Sarah choked on her drink. That's not really the point, is it? Your mother. Mother always does this, Zyra interrupted. She thinks she knows best for everyone. Did you know she tried to marry me to a Centaurian prince last year? His mind was so boring. Just rules and protocols all day. What happened to him? He ran away after I showed him my combat training. Zyra grinned, showing teeth that were just a bit too sharp. Mother was so angry. But you're different. Your mind is like a locked room. Interesting. Sarah set down her eating tools. Look, Princess. Zyra, I'm here because Earth needs this alliance. I'm trying my best to be diplomatic. Zyra rolled her eyes. Boring. Mother has enough diplomatic people around her. Tell me what you really think. I won't hear it anyway. Your mind is too quiet. Fine. Sarah felt her patience snap. I think this whole situation is crazy. I'm a diplomat, not a political pawn. And while you seem unique, I had plans for my life that didn't include an arranged marriage to an alien princess. Instead of being offended, Zyra laughed out loud, a sound Sarah hadn't heard any other Nexaran make. Finally, some honesty. Mother will hate you. It's perfect. Sarah stared at the princess, who was still chuckling. You're nothing like what I expected. Good. Zyra stood up. Come on. I want to show you my private training room. If we're going to be forced together, you might as well learn how to fight like a Nexaran. As Sarah followed the princess, she realized something. This arranged marriage might be crazy, but at least it wouldn't be boring. Whether that was good or bad remained to be seen. 2 weeks after moving into the palace, Sarah noticed something odd. Every time she passed the queen in the hallways, the monarch would stare at her with an intensity that went beyond normal curiosity. It was almost like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Today, Sarah was in the palace library, surrounded by crystal tablets that glowed with Nexaran text. After learning to fight from Zyra, and getting thrown across the training room more times than she could count, she had decided to learn more about Nexaran culture. Ambassador Chen, a soft mental voice touched her mind. Sarah looked up to see Anra, an elderly palace historian. You're studying our marriage customs. Yes, Sarah nodded, especially royal marriages. But something doesn't make sense. The texts say the Queen's visions about marriages are always witnessed by the High Council, but for my arrangement with Zyra, Anbra's silver skin paled slightly. There were special circumstances. Sarah had been a diplomat long enough to recognize evasion. What kind of circumstances? I should not say more. Ambra turned to leave, but hesitated. Though you might find the military archives interesting, especially the reports about the Swarm Collective's first attacks. Later that night, Sarah snuck into the military archive room. Zyra had taught her how to avoid the guards' patrol routes, though the princess probably hadn't expected this use of that knowledge. The archive tablets lit up as she touched them. Most were in Nexaran, but she had learned enough to understand the basics. What she found made her blood run cold. The Swarm Collective's greatest weapon wasn't their ships or their soldiers, it was their ability to control minds. Every species they had encountered fell under their influence. Every species except humans, Sarah whispered. The tablets showed countless failed attempts by the swarm to control human minds. Something about human brain structure made them completely immune. She dug deeper. There were medical reports about Nexaran genetics, studies about inheritance of traits, and finally, a private memo from the Queen to her scientists. Sarah's hands shook as she read it. The human immunity to swarm control must be preserved. If we can introduce this trait into the royal bloodline through my daughter's marriage, our species might survive. The ambassador's diplomatic position makes her the perfect choice. The vision story will provide cultural acceptance. Sarah set down the tablet, her mind racing. The Queen hadn't had any vision. This was all a calculated plan to get human genes into the royal family. You're smarter than you look. Sarah spun around. Princess Zira stood in the doorway, her star-filled eyes unreadable. How long have you known? Sarah asked. About Mother's plan. Since the beginning. Zira walked into the room. I'm not surprised you figured it out. You're too clever to fool for long. And you're okay with this, being used as part of her genetic experiment. Zira shrugged. Mother always has plans, but her plans don't control my feelings. She looked directly at Sarah. Unless you want to call off the marriage now that you know the truth. Sarah thought carefully. The Queen had manipulated her, yes. But these past weeks with Zira had been different, challenging, interesting. No, Sarah finally said. But I'm keeping this information. It might be useful. Zira grinned. See, this is why I like you. You don't just get angry. You think strategically. She held out her hand. Come on, let's get out of here before the guards come. And Sarah, thanks for not running away like the Centaurian prince. As they snuck back through the palace halls, Sarah realized she had gained something valuable. Leverage. The Queen might think she was controlling this game, but now Sarah was a player, not just a piece. A month had passed since Sarah discovered the Queen's secret plan. She sat cross-legged on the training room floor, watching Zira practice with her crystal sword. The princess moved like liquid silver, each motion precise and deadly. You're staring again. Zira's mental voice held amusement. I'm studying your technique, Sarah replied out loud. Over the past weeks, they had developed this pattern. Zira using telepathy, Sarah speaking, somehow meeting in the middle. Zira stopped practicing and sat down beside her. Something's bothering you. I can tell even without reading your mind. How do Nexarans handle emotions? Sarah asked. I've been here for weeks, but I've never seen anyone except you express feelings openly. We don't usually. Emotions are felt through mental links. But you, Zira touched Sarah's hand. You're different. You feel everything so strongly, but your mind stays quiet. Show me how humans express feelings. Sarah thought for a moment, then smiled. Okay. On Earth, when someone's happy, they might do this. She wrapped her arms around Zira in a hug. The princess stiffened, then slowly relaxed. This is nice. Warm, like a mental link, but physical. She pulled back, looking curious. What other human expressions are there? For the next hour, Sarah taught Zira about human gestures. Handshakes, high fives, even silly faces. The princess tried each one, her usual grace replaced by awkward enthusiasm. Mother would have a fit if she saw me now. Zira laughed, attempting to wink and failing completely. A royal princess, making faces like a child. Your mother could use a few lessons in expressing herself, Sarah said. Maybe then she wouldn't need fake visions to get what she wants. Zira's expression turned serious. She means well, you know. Our people are terrified of the swarm. Everyone knows someone who was taken, their mind erased and controlled. She looked at Sarah. But you humans, you're completely safe from them. Do you know how amazing that is? Sarah remembered the fear in the archive reports. I'm starting to understand. But that's not the only reason I'm still here. Before Zira could respond, A group of court nobles passed by the training room. They stared at the princess and the humans sitting together on the floor, their mental whispers clear in Zyra's mind. "Let me teach you something about being royal," Zyra said after they left. "Stand up." She positioned Sarah in front of her. "When people judge you, stand straight, like this." She adjusted Sarah's posture. "Show them that their opinions mean nothing." "Is that what you do?" Sarah asked. "Every day." Zyra's mental voice was soft. "Being different isn't easy, even for a princess, or maybe especially for a princess." Sarah thought about all the times she'd seen Zyra break traditions, challenge rules, be herself despite the disapproval. "You're the bravest person I've ever met." "Brave?" Zyra seemed surprised. "I'm just stubborn, like someone else I know." She smiled. "Come on, I want to try that hug thing again. For diplomatic reasons, of course." Sarah laughed and hugged her. This time, Zyra hugged back without hesitation. They stayed like that for a moment, neither speaking nor using telepathy, just sharing the silence. Later, as they walked through the palace gardens, Sarah realized something had changed. This wasn't just about Earth's alliance anymore, or the Queen's genetic plans. Somewhere between the awkward first dinner and now, she and Zyra had built something real. The arranged marriage was still arranged, but maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the worst diplomatic assignment after all. The attack came during a formal dinner. Sarah was trying to eat with crystal utensils, while Zyra secretly made faces at her from across the table when the palace alarms started blaring. "Swarm ships." A guard's panicked mental voice echoed through the hall. They'd broken through the outer defenses. The queen stood up, her face calm, but her mental voice sharp with command. "Get everyone to the safe rooms. Now." But before anyone could move, the crystal walls of the dining hall turned black. A deep, hissing mental voice filled everyone's minds. "Submit to the swarm." Sarah watched in horror as the Nexaran guards began dropping to their knees, their silver skin turning gray as the swarm's mind control took hold. Even the queen stumbled, fighting against the mental assault. Only 3 people remained standing. Sarah, whose human mind was immune. Zyra, who was fighting back with incredible mental strength, and a single guard who had managed to resist. "Sarah." Zyra's mental voice was strained. "The control center. We need to activate the palace shields." Sarah grabbed Zyra's hand. "Where is it?" "Below. But the swarm soldiers will be everywhere by now." Sarah looked around quickly. The controlled guards were starting to stand up, their movements jerky like puppets. "Then we'll have to fight our way down. Can you still use your combat training?" Zyra grabbed 2 crystal swords from the wall. "Try to keep up, human." She tossed one to Sarah. They ran through the halls, encountering both swarm soldiers, tall, insect-like creatures, and mind-controlled Nexarans. Sarah's diplomatic life hadn't prepared her for real combat, but Zyra's training sessions had. They moved together, Sarah immune to the mental attacks, while Zyra handled the physical fighting. "Left." Zyra shouted mentally as a controlled guard swung at Sarah. She ducked, and Zyra knocked the guard out with the flat of her blade. "The control center is just ahead." They reached a large crystal door. Inside, swarm soldiers were already trying to destroy the control panels. "Any plans?" Sarah asked, gripping her sword. "You handle the controls. I'll keep them busy." Zyra's eyes blazed with starlight. "Mother always said I spend too much time fighting and not enough time being diplomatic. Time to prove her right." Sarah nodded, and they burst into the room. While Zyra engaged the swarm soldiers with incredible speed, Sarah ran to the control panel. Her hands flew over the crystal controls as Zyra had taught her. "Hurry." Zyra called, blocking a strike that would have taken her head off. "I can't hold them forever." Sarah found the shield controls. But there was a problem. Activating them required a mental command from a royal family member. "Zyra, I need you here." The princess fought her way to Sarah's side, her silver skin scratched but shining with effort. Together, they placed their hands on the control panel, Zyra providing the mental command, Sarah's human presence blocking the swarm's interference. The palace hummed. Crystal walls blazed with light. A massive shield of energy surged outward, pushing back the swarm's influence. All around them, controlled Nexarans collapsed as the mental connection broke. "We did it," Sarah breathed. "We?" Zyra grinned, despite her exhaustion. "You mean I did all the fighting while you pushed some buttons?" "Excuse me? Who's immune to mind control here?" They looked at each other and started laughing, the relief and absurdity of the situation hitting them at once. Around them, the palace was in chaos, but they had protected it, together. "Mother's going to be insufferable about this," Zyra said. "She'll say it proves her vision was right." Sarah smiled. Maybe she wasn't entirely wrong. 3 days after the swarm attack, Sarah and Zyra stood before the Nexaran High Council. The Grand Council chamber still showed signs of battle. Cracked crystal walls and broken decorations waited to be repaired. "You want us to change our entire way of life." One council member's mental voice was sharp with disbelief. "Based on the ideas of a human." "Based on what saved our lives," Zyra corrected. She stood tall, her royal presence filling the room. "The swarm almost destroyed us because we rely too heavily on telepathic communication. Sarah's human ways showed me there are other paths." Sarah stepped forward. "Your people are strong, but you're vulnerable because you depend only on mental links. Humans learn to express ourselves in many ways. Words, gestures, actions. These could help protect your people." The Queen, who had been silent until now, studied them both. Her recovery from the swarm's mental attack had been slow, but her mind was as sharp as ever. "And what changes do you suggest?" the Queen asked. Sarah and Zyra exchanged glances. They had stayed up late planning this, sitting in Sarah's room, sharing Earth snacks that her family had sent. "First," Zyra said, "we need to train our people in non-telepathic communication. When the swarm attacked, those who couldn't resist their mental control had no way to fight back. Second," Sarah added, "combine Nexaran crystal technology with human defensive strategies. Your weapons are amazing, but they're all mentally controlled. We need backup systems." One of the younger council members leaned forward. "The princess and the human did save the palace using both their abilities together. And look at them now," another councilor noted. "They communicate without telepathy, yet understand each other perfectly." The Queen raised her hand for silence. She stood and walked down to where Sarah and Zyra waited. For a long moment, she just looked at them. "When I arranged this marriage," she finally said, her mental voice reaching everyone, "I hoped for human immunity in our bloodline. Instead, you two have given us something more valuable. A new way to survive." Zyra blinked in surprise. "Mother, the old ways nearly cost us everything." "Perhaps." The Queen actually spoke aloud, her voice rough from disuse. "Perhaps it's time to learn new ones." The council chamber erupted in shocked whispers, both mental and vocal. The Queen, breaking centuries of tradition by speaking out loud, had made her support clear. But not everyone was happy. Lord Vex, the most traditional council member, stood up. "This is outrageous. First a human in the royal family, and now you want to abandon our cultural heritage. The princess and this Earth diplomat are destroying everything we stand for." "No," Zyra's voice rang out, also speaking aloud. "We're helping our people survive. There's a difference." Sarah touched Zyra's hand, offering silent support. The princess squeezed back, then faced Lord Vex. "I challenge any who oppose these changes to spend one day communicating without telepathy," Zyra announced. "If you succeed, we'll drop our proposals." The council members looked uncomfortable. Lord Vex opened his mouth, then closed it, realizing he didn't know how to speak aloud. "The challenge stands," the Queen said, a hint of amusement in her mental voice. "And while the council considers it, I believe we have a wedding to plan." She looked at Sarah. Unless you object, Ambassador. Sarah looked at Zyra, who was trying not to smile. No objections, Your Majesty. Though I hope traditional Nexaren weddings don't require telepathic vows. Don't worry, Zyra said, grinning. We'll make our own traditions. The wedding day arrived with both excitement and tension. The palace's great crystal dome had been repaired, and beneath it, hundreds of guests gathered. Nexaren nobles in their flowing robes, human diplomats in formal uniforms, and even a few representatives from other allied species. Sarah stood in her preparation room, wearing a unique outfit that combined an Earth diplomatic uniform with Nexaren royal designs. The crystal accents on her shoulders caught the light, making them sparkle like stars. Nervous? Ambassador Lee, her old mentor from Earth, asked. A little. Sarah adjusted her collar. A month ago, this marriage was just a diplomatic arrangement. Now it's real. Lee smiled. I've seen how you two look at each other. That's not diplomacy. Before Sarah could respond, the door burst open. A palace guard rushed in, his mental voice urgent. Ambassador Chen, there's trouble in the ceremony hall. Sarah ran to the main hall, her modified uniform allowing her to move quickly. Inside, she found chaos. Lord Vex and his supporters stood before the crystal altar, their mental voices raised in protest. This marriage is a mockery of our traditions. Vex's mental shout echoed through the hall. The ceremony must follow the ancient ways, with telepathic binding. Zyra stood facing them, wearing her own combination of military armor and wedding clothes. She looked beautiful and fierce, but Sarah could see the tension in her shoulders. The ancient ways failed against the swarm, Zyra said aloud, making several nobles flinch. We're doing this our way. Sarah walked up to stand beside her. The crowd parted, watching. Lord Vex, Sarah said clearly, you've had a month to learn spoken language. Have you succeeded? The Lord's face darkened. He opened his mouth, made a few awkward sounds, then closed it again. That's what I thought. Sarah turned to address everyone. I came here because of politics, because Earth needed an alliance and your queen had a plan. But I stayed because I found something unexpected. She looked at Zyra. I found someone worth choosing. Zyra's star-filled eyes sparkled. And I found someone who taught me it's okay to be different. She faced the crowd. Our wedding will honor both cultures, just as our partnership does. The queen stood from her throne. For a moment, everyone held their breath, waiting. Then she did something unprecedented. She walked down to the altar and spoke aloud. My daughter is right. Her voice was stronger now, weeks of practice showing. I once forced this union through manipulation. Today, they choose it freely. That makes it more powerful than any traditional binding. Lord Vex and his supporters, faced with their queen speaking openly, backed down. The ceremony began. It was unlike anything either world had seen. Sarah and Zyra exchanged spoken vows in both English and Nexaren. They shared traditional earth rings, modified with Nexaren crystals. When Zyra took Sarah's hand, their minds touched lightly, not in the old binding way, but in a gentle connection they had developed together. I choose you, Sarah said aloud. And I choose you, Zyra replied, both speaking and sending the thought. The queen pronounced them married using both methods of communication, and the hall erupted in a mixture of mental and vocal celebrations. Later, at the reception, Sarah found the queen watching them dance. Your vision wasn't entirely wrong, Sarah said, just not in the way you planned. No, the queen agreed, speaking softly. It was better. You two have given us hope, not just against the swarm, but for a future where we can adapt and grow. Sarah looked at Zyra, who was trying to teach some human children how to bow properly and laughing at their attempts. The future's going to be interesting, Sarah said. With you two. The queen actually smiled. I don't doubt it.